I'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. Matt Feldman here. As usual, here's a couple ideas about an effective meeting. Today, we're going to talk about office space. I actually learned how to make my own meme yesterday. I thought that was pretty sweet. I went out and found this because if you've ever watched Office Space, the movie, it's hilarious. And this is one of the principal characters. I can't remember, but he's pretty famous for other work he's done, but we'll talk about that afterwards. But this is kind of not his main type of character. He's kind of a tough guy, actually. Today is October 1st, not September 24th. The date's wrong on that slide, so we'll just forgive me for that one. Let's see here. Move some things around. Everything's off in the wrong place today. All right, there we go. So there we go. So all I'm going to do today is just talk about different ideas and different places where you can be working. That's the topic for the day, is office space. Where would you set up, and why would you want to be in different places? Clearly, the one where almost all of us, I think everybody I know, starts is at home, because we usually don't start these consulting practices with this idea fully developed, right? So we start in our at our dining room table or in our bedrooms, which is where a lot of people have returned, even if they do have office space, which is kind of ironic. But you know, why would we want to work from home? Well, the key reason you may want to do work from home is because it's cheap. It's free. I mean, you already have the space, so why wouldn't you want to do that? And frankly, a lot of you will probably never move out of your home. You'll always be in your home. If you're like me, I built a new home and I built an office space for myself. And I worked there for several years, and I got real bored, and it was not for me. And now it's my wife's office space, and it's beautiful. It looks like a spa. You walk in there and it's like candles and flowers and things. It's beautiful. It was not like that when I was there. As a dump, to be honest. It was terrible. But anyway, the key reasons you're going to want to work from home is it's affordable. Another good pro on this is you can pay yourself rent. I don't know if you've thought about this. Now, it depends on how you set yourself up. You may set yourself up to be an LLC or an S Corp, or you may be doing this as a DBA, or what they also call a sole prop or sole proprietorship. If you're like me and you're an S Corp, you have expenses for your business. The business has expenses, not you as an individual. Your business has expenses, and you're separating yourself. So the S Corp can actually pay rent, and the S Corp can pay rent to another individual who happens to be you, which is kind of, you know, you got to split your brain and think about that for a little bit. But you can actually pay yourself rent. So I pay myself $265.49. How did I come up with that? Well, I came up with the expense of running a house, and I measured the square footage of my office, and I do still have an office. It's just the smaller, it's the one downstairs now. But you figure out your square footage of your office, and my office is 5% of the whole building. And so I look at the cost of operating that house and divide it and multiply it times 5%, and that was $265.49. And so I pay my wife $265.49 each month for rent. So that's actually a neat idea as a pro. One of the problems with working from home, and actually I did work from home when I had an employee, didn't work out really well. We were in my office, sharing an office, the two of us. Literally, I had to take the guest couch and put it on its side, and Tom had a folding table that he worked at right underneath this couch that was precariously sitting right above his head, ready to fall on his head. And it just goes to show you how awesome Tom is, because he'll do anything. But the problem was he would come and we would work, and we'd have the conversations and do all the things that you do, and we shared the room, and it was just fine. Except for the fact that we would go to meetings, and then I would be at a meeting and he wouldn't have a place to go because it was my house, and we just didn't ever get to the point where he could just walk in my house, and you'd walk upstairs and we're across the hall from my son. It's just like that didn't really work out. You know, shortly thereafter, when I moved into the space where I am now. So you can't work easily with other people. And invariably your kid or your dog, your spouse, your mother-in-law is going to interrupt you. So you can't get away from home when you're at home. You're at home, so obviously you're not going to have the same level of privacy. You can set things up, you can lock doors, you can be downstairs where everybody's upstairs, you can be at the end of the hall, but you're still going to be at home. And then you're going to have all those temptations of being at home, like I should really go, clean the bathroom or whatever, which I know some people say. So those are the cons. Another idea for working is working at the coffee shop or at the library. Again, it's free. You get free Wi-Fi this way too. You're not paying yourself for use of the coffee shop, but it's not private. You could have some hidden costs because you're forced to buy, coffee or lunch. So you probably save money by staying home, but you are out. Another pro I didn't put in here is you're likely to run into other people like yourself who you can use as kind of like informal business coaching or something like that. But you're going to get that look from the staff eventually. They're going to look at you, why are you always here? I never did this, but in my early days, I thought maybe I should get out and I should work from different, community spaces like a library. And I thought, all the libraries in my community would allow me to sit there all day if I wanted to. And so I thought I'd set up a schedule and I would go to different libraries and use that as my office space. I never got to that point, but I thought maybe that would be kind of a cool idea. And I think there are people who do that. Next idea is a co-working space. So they've been around for a long time, but they really kind of picked up steam in the last 10 years. I think it's called WeWork, but that's the big chain that's out there. But we have them in Edwardsville. I've thought about starting one. I have 10,000 ideas, most of which I'll never get around to going through with. But creating a co-working space for others. But we have a co-working space down the street from where I am. And it doesn't make a lot of sense in my community in Edwardsville because there's enough open office space that you can rent. But the reason people do it is because it's affordable. It's usually you can have anywhere from like a touchdowns place. You can have secretarial staff. They usually have free coffee. The place down the street has free coffee, but there's one in St. Louis that has free beer. I mean, I don't think that's really good for the working piece, but maybe after work. I think it's supported by Anheuser-Busch, which has a major location in St. Louis, and now I guess it's AB InBev. But people do it because the space may be upgraded, it could be downgraded, so you could work from where you just have a place where you can sit. You can always have a place to sit down, but you'd be in kind of like a library situation. But you might be able to upgrade into a shared office or where you could schedule an office space and then have a dedicated office. And so there's usually different ideas on this. A number of our colleagues in the TIG will do this. I think Laura Keene has had it, and she still may have space. People do it to get out of the house, and it's kind of usually a little more affordable than getting a dedicated space. Like I said, in Edwardsville, you can get a dedicated space for less than you could at a co-working space. But you're going to have distractions and noise. There's often a lack of privacy. And you're going to have insufficient space or meeting facilities. So you may have to schedule the conference room down the hall, and it may never be available. So that's the thing that when I was reading up on this, why people have problems. The next idea is to lease space, and this is what I've done several different times in several different locations. I'm in a leased space right now. We have 2 offices. There are actually 3 offices, but one has got 2 offices within the one locked door. You can lock in price for a little while, at least, but it will vary. It will eventually, it could go up with time. So that's kind of a pro and a con. You can free up capital. This is one of the reasons why people do this, as opposed to buying a place, which is the next slide. You can free up capital, and when you're leasing space, you can probably find a nicer space than what you may be able to afford to buy, because it's going to be a lot of upfront costs. You want to read your contracts carefully and understand what you're getting yourself into. I've always leased where I've had all the costs of running the place, like electric and everything like that included. And I've had places where they provide you internet and everything like that as well. So you want to check to see what you're getting. I have N and N. That's what you might see a lease as a triple net or net lease, that you'll see it called that. That means you get all the advantages of owning a place without actually owning it, which means you're paying the property taxes, you're paying for the utilities, you're paying the 3 nets. I forget what each one of the 3 nets are, but you're paying for everything associated with owning that space, all the upgrade costs. It's usually the way restaurants work. So the restaurant downstairs, they paid to upgrade the place and put all the kitchen facilities in there and all the tables and the bar and everything like that they have at the space. They pay the property taxes. It's effectively like they own the space, but they don't. They pay rent. You are not gaining equity in leased space. If the money is essentially, I say it's like going down the drain. I give $825 where I am right now each month for the 3 office spaces we have, which is super cheap. I get it. It's awesome. But it's just going down the drain. That is not going, I'm not building any equity out of that money. I put this pro in here of subleasing the space to yourself. This is something my lawyer brought up, and I put a question mark next to it because I haven't decided whether I think this is a good idea or a bad idea. Because I'm not sure if it's ethical or unethical. I think it probably is it's totally legal. But the idea is like I said, I'm leasing this space for $825 a month, and we're going to expand with some more staff that will be starting soon. But I would effectively sign the lease as Matt Feldman, not as Goshen Education Consulting, and then Matt Feldman would lease the space to Goshen Education Consulting for whatever I want it to be. As far as what's on the books, if I lease the space for let's say $1,650 a month, that's $825 profit to Matt Feldman because I'm subleasing it to myself. So that's the idea that the lawyer came up with, and it's totally legal. I haven't decided whether I think it's a good idea, because if it's money coming from a specific grant, that might look fishy to an auditor. But I don't have any specific anything tied directly to any grants right now. It's just I have space for my people and myself to work in. So that's just an interesting idea I wanted to put in there for the pro. Lastly, talk about purchasing space. And this is actually where I want to go at some point. And this has everything to do with the fact that I'm independent. I'm an independent evaluator, but I'm also independent. I like to have my freedom, and I don't like putting money in somebody else's pocket. Eventually, I'd like the money that I'm spending each month to go into equity that will have a value for me down the road. So when you purchase space, if you're buying in the right community, it should increase, the property value should increase, so you're building on your equity there. But of course, the con to that is it might go down. We don't really know what's happening to office space in the long run right now as a result of COVID-19, because COVID-19 may actually end up causing office space to decrease in value, which is kind of what I'm hoping for, because I want to buy maybe in 6 months or a year from now. But that might be a con for the people who currently own space. Hopefully it'll be a pro for me, because I'd like to see some of the office space around here decrease in value and then increase over time. You do have fixed costs. You will know what you're paying in your mortgage, or hypothetically someday you'll have it all paid off and you won't have a mortgage, which would be fantastic. But you have fixed costs that way. I mean, the cons are, that you have that upfront cost of a down payment, or you have to pay for the space, and that's money that you can't use towards other things. So for me right now, my priority is to bring on a third evaluator, me, Tom, and a third person. And if I commit to buying a place, then that's the money that I can't use towards salary for the third person that can help grow the business. You own a business, you own a building, you have to maintain those things. So you've got to figure out how to fix the water system that's leaking in the basement. That's your problem now. Just like owning a house, you've got all that maintenance that you have to figure out. And so you may find yourself doing that. One of the pros, though, is if you buy a big enough space that you can afford, of course, you can lease some of that space to somebody else. So you could be that you could find yourself back in that co-working space. Now, what's really interesting is I've done a lot of creative things. Ann and Susan have heard me talk about this at the conferences, and so I'm going to give you some creative ideas that I've thrown out there. Oftentimes, you may want to negotiate a free space with a client. So for about 2.5 years, I had a project that was ongoing with St. Clair Regional Office of Education, and they're good friends of mine, and I've been working with them for many, many years previous to that. And I said, hey, look, you've got this huge office space, and they had this unfortunate, they had to lay off like half of their people way back in the day, like about 10 years ago, and they have all this office space that's being unused. And I said, can I work here? Because I'd like to have more of a working space. And they're like, yeah, sure. So I moved into a space and it was great. And as it turns out, I didn't notice at the time, we didn't talk about it, but they ended up leasing that space that I was using back to themselves because they were able to charge a grant for it that I was on. I thought, well, hey, more power to you. So it worked out for them just as well because they were able to make some money off of me working there. And it was great to have coworkers for the 2.5 years I was there. Another thing I do is I just ask around. The space that's listed out there on different websites and things like that are the ones that, you know, it's actually going to be more expensive because these are the people who know what they're doing, who are really prepared and thinking about it. But oftentimes you might just ask around. If you're a part of any civic community organizations, just ask around and see what's going on. Like Rotary would be a good place to ask around. In fact, I think I'm going to put a note out to some of my friends at Rotary. I'm not in the local Rotary organizations, but just to see if there's any excess space where you can move in. This didn't happen, but there's an office right around the corner from where I am, and it's going to be too expensive, but I know nobody's been working in that space since March, since the start of the COVID-19 deal. And so I looked up who manages the building, and I emailed them and said, what are you doing with this building? Because nobody's been in it since March. And they responded, hey, we're not going to use it. Let's look into it. So they've looked into it, and it's going to be over $2,000 a month. And so I said, well, you know, it's a little rich for my blood. But anyway, it was an idea. And so they still may come back and provide me an opportunity to move in, but they think it's going to be more than what I'm willing to pay. Negotiate a space at a local university. I did this as well. I had grad assistants, and I developed a relationship with Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville, which is the local regional institution in my town. And I've had great relationships with them over the years. And I just said, hey, why not let me move into your space? And I know you've got an office somewhere. You're a big university. And so they gave me a really small space. It was too small, really, and it was inconvenient. Like I couldn't park anywhere near where I was working. But I did that for a year. And so that was a neat idea. And then they said, you can keep it. And I said, well, I have 2 grad assistants now. And they said, well, they're going to have to work in the space. We don't have another space for you. So we moved to another location. And it worked out just fine. But, you know, you can do that. There's nothing is off the table. And I just said, look around for an unused space and make an offer, which is what I did. But, I mean, asking around about excess space makes sense. We looked at an office on the other side of town from a friend of mine who he had I forget what they call it, but it's like a spa kind of a situation, and you'd go in there and for recuperation after hard athletic events and stuff like that. And they didn't like the location because it was kind of hidden in behind, and you couldn't see their sign from the street. So they moved, and I just ran into him literally in the parking lot after he got his haircut. And he says, hey, we moved over here. And I said, how about your old space? And so we went and looked at it, and it's not ideal for us, so we're not going to go with it. But it was, you know, something that happens. So, you know, I like to do my 5.5 ideas. Here's 5.5 ideas for office space. If you're going to buy, you need probably about 15% down for a down payment. More is better. Here we go. Pay yourself rent. That was that idea that I threw at you in the lease space idea. So it's an idea. I'm not sure if it works for everybody, but it's a neat idea that for you to find ways, this is more about how you can generate more money from your business. So that's actually tax-free money, what you pay yourself rent. I pay myself rent already at home, but this is another way to pay myself rent from the business from Goshen Education to Matt Feldman. Don't buy or rent more than you need. Be careful about how much or actually make sure you're buying enough so that if you're going to grow, that you have space to grow into as well. So it's kind of a two ideas in one. I have the ability to continue to move down the hall and all the way around the hall in the space I'm at. They hardly lease any of the space on the floor I'm at, so we're going to rent 2 more spaces down the hall starting in November, and hypothetically we have 1, 2, 3, 6, 7 more spaces we could move into on this floor, because for reasons I don't entirely understand, they don't lease a lot of the space on this floor, and there's about 15 spaces, so it's an opportunity. Be careful with your contract provisions. So when you go to lease a space, look at it carefully. One of those things that you're going to want to check to see if there's any insurance requirements. Also, one of the things I didn't see the first time I signed a lease was the stipulation on continuation of your contract. So I was at my initial space for 2.5 years. After 1 year, I didn't sign another 1-year lease. It was a 1-year lease, but there's a contract provision that says if you don't say anything, we're just going to assume you're in for another year. So I was 2.5 years into it, and I said, hey, we never signed a lease, so I want out. I'm going to move out. And they said, it doesn't work that way. You didn't reach the stipulation. They were super cool about it. It's a great person who I rented from. He's like, you can move out if you want, but technically, I could ask you for rent through the end of the year that you signed. So, but he was still pretty cool about it, and I got out. But anyway, make sure you're reading those contract provisions. Lastly, think creatively. I gave you a couple ideas on what I've done creatively, but use your social network to gain different ideas. And certainly come and talk to us at these chats and think. You can think out loud with us, and you never know what's going to happen. So with that, I'm going to stop the presentation.